I have a point on this one. This is like a thing in the vision of where Bitcoin is going to take us that I still somewhat can't get my head around, and it is that if we do fix the monetary system and get that all working fine, and its incentives are good and everything, and reduce the size of government and all this, what do we still do about people who are just going to still ignore that and be aggressive? And even though the incentives might be reduced towards aggression, there are still people who just naturally want to take, and I mean, I'll be specific as well. Like, it's a male thing.
The way I see it is that what you remove is the smart criminals. You don't remove the stupid criminals like that are going to just go to a football game and kick the shit out of one another because they supported the wrong team or whatever. So that will probably still be around. Just this brute aggressivity, but still a clever person will realize that if you don't know how much another person owns, and you can't really take it by force because it's in their heads, so you can't kill them, then no one gets anything. What game theory tells us about that is like, at best, you get away with 50% of that person's Bitcoin. So it's probably better to interact peacefully. So you like remove the real dangerous people, the psychopaths, the people in charge that conduct world wars and so on. So that's what you take away. But petty crime, like there will, of course, still be teenagers and there will be grunts, people in British pubs saying "oi,"
What was the example you were going to use?
What I was thinking of is that our friend Yoni was telling me a little bit about this, that there have been some gang attacks in Sweden where people have like chopped off fingers or something if they don't give them whatever they're looking for, and it's just dark stuff, right? And I think, what was I latching onto from what you said? It's just something like, where are we headed? I still don't see the solution where it's not exactly about solving the issue of human nature towards violence. It's more like, what structures are we going to still need to have that look a lot like today's governments? Like, that's the thing that still gets me. And I'm not even thinking in the vein of that we're going to need some kind of actual daddy government. That's not what I'm thinking.
You're going to need law.
Well, yeah. And I think that this is where stuff gets really interesting, because where we're at right now is so extremely rudimentary in terms of the form of law that Bitcoin provides, because it's essentially all transactional right now. But one of the things that I imagine is using something like mini scripts or Amavan or whatever multi-sig scheme you want, that there's essentially an ability to put your money into that multi-sig scheme. Guy shows up to cut off my fingers, and I go, look, you can look at the address, you can see how much money is there. This isn't a multi-sig that I don't control. And because you asked me to put my password first, I put in actually like a panic password that has now messaged all of the other owners of these private keys.
Yeah. And
they know if they show up within the next block with a shotgun to kill you, that they're going to get the amount of money, they're going to get 10% of the wallet or however much we've agreed upon. And also that's fluid based upon how quick they respond, who they are, where they're at. And essentially, like, I think what we're going to do vis-a-vis cryptography, and essentially with the time chain as this backbone to sort of keep truth within the sort of law that we're going to implement, we're going to create a new form of law that utilizes the cryptographic protocol in such a way that we're going to start playing with it and doing these really interesting things. And it's funny, this reminds me of a quote from my favorite philosopher who I base most of my work off of, Giorgio Agamben. And he says that, and this is kind of paraphrasing, but essentially it's like, when humanity starts to play with law as like a disused object, similar to how children play with a disused object, we can return law not in order to restore it to its canonical use, but in order to free us from it for good. And so to me, like, the great problem with law today is it represents a raw and thoughtless form of authoritarianism that has nothing to do with the law at all. The law is actually about the consensus of what we agree upon to be the law. And it's very, very important to understand what the law is in its traditional form is it is called a commonwealth. This is the traditional idea of what law is supposed to be. So first of all, commonwealth, that's literally what Bitcoin is. It is a wealth that we hold in common because it provides a unitary form of law for both of us.
Yeah.
But even more interesting is the Latin translation of commonwealth is res publica. This means the public thing. And what's interesting is that the law is the most public of all things to all people. And we live in a world today where we don't have a law anymore. There's a two-tiered society where there are some people that can get away with the most heinous of all crimes. And most particularly, the 20th century was a story of multiple genocides where hundreds of millions of people were killed and not a single individual was murdered. That's extremely important to understand, that hundreds of millions of people were destroyed and deprived of their life, but not a single human was murdered. Because murder is a legal crime. And not a single Jew was killed in the Holocaust was illegal because they were all stripped of citizenship first. Mm-hmm. And that made sure that they had no access to the law in and of itself. This is where we are at today. And I also believe that the crimes that happened in World War II were so extreme and significant that it obliterated the law totally, because it showed that once you had psychopaths in charge of a nation state, they could utilize the policies of the state to destroy other populations of people. And we've witnessed that same strategy executed multiple times since then.
What about the case for optimism, though? So, like, we...
I'm always so dark that people need to press that.
Yeah. So because a way to look at this is like, we have Bitcoin, we have social media. Sure, you can be shadow banned and you can have a harder time reaching the person you want to reach and whatever. But still, even the flawed social media platforms we have today, and then Nostr and other alternatives are blossoming up slowly but surely as well. But we have those tools, and like post-COVID or post the lockdowns, Zoom calls and stuff have become insanely much better than they were pre-COVID. Like, no one was really doing Zoom calls on a daily basis before the lockdowns. So that sort of forced us to develop this technology, and now you can reach any person regardless of where they are on the globe. I mean, we can record a podcast with Rob, for instance, when he's in Hawaii, with no lag. And the program we use, the AIs are so good now, and there's a race to become the dominant software for stuff like this. So the program can edit this stuff for us, cut out the noise. You know, if we have two cameras, it switches to the person that's about to talk before he starts talking. All of this stuff is happening in real time. It's the speed of the technology improvements is just insane. How good that is. And so all those tools are there, and and you add Bitcoin to that. It's just all the tools are there. I talked to my friend Christian, the founder of BTCX, the oldest Swedish exchange, and he gave me some numbers of how many customers they have had over the years. And he said around 300,000. And there's another big Swedish exchange. And so if you take into account that there might be some customers that use both services, but they're about as big. So add another 100,000, that's 400,000. And let's say there's 100,000 people that bought off of other exchanges or acquired.
Sweden's population?
10 million.
Okay. So
it's 5% of the population that has the power to pay people in Bitcoin because they all own Bitcoin. And 100% of the population has the ability to receive Bitcoin. So the economy is already there. Mm-hmm. We just have to tap into it. People just have to start accepting Bitcoin for the goods and services, and you're out. You don't have to worry about the government anymore. Like, it's really that simple. And if you add all the, as you were alluding to, the multi-sigs and the coin joins and whatnot, and like all these technologies, they are already there. And the educational platforms and the content that is out there, you can learn how to be a sovereign individual. I mean, I'm working on a course based on my praxeology book on a platform called Emeralize, which is like Udemy and powered by Lightning. So it's a cross between Udemy and maybe Substack. Yeah. And this course is going to be a part of a master's program in self-sovereignty. Like, and this is not the only thing. I'm just a tiny part of Emeralize is also just a tiny part of this ecosystem that is building around this thing. So I think there's a great case to be made for, we've got this. Everyone in this community knows that CBDCs are shit. And we know that like there are ways around all these things. And people are going to look at us like, look at those guys. They seem to be happy and like not worried about stuff. And that's going to, it smittens people. Like, so I think, and I think that's smittens. Is that even a word?
To be smitten. Yeah,
to be
it's a word now.
That is important because that's how we grow the community, and like the spreading this optimism about the future, like because being angry at stuff and just focusing on this was so fucking bad and this is so fucking bad and we need to fight this and we need to just don't worry about it. It's like don't retweet shitcoiners. don't promote governments. Don't even talk about it. Just show people there's a way to live life without worries because you got a tiny stack and it's going to last forever. Like,
no, I mean, there's a great point, particularly for like the angry rant guy. It's probably pretty important for me to emphasize that, like, I feel a greater amount of hope than I've ever felt, and every day it grows more.
Good to hear it.
And you said at the beginning, you'd used the word bloom, and that hooked me because I think right now we're going through a renaissance that is a bloom of ideas that are exploding, and there are so many things going on, and it's growing. And like you said, we have all of the technology, the ability. So much is just an educational aspect, and so. Maybe I'm mistaken, but maybe that gap is going to be much shorter than we think. And I think there's a pretty strong argument to say that it will be shorter just because we have such a pliable herd population that once they actually see that like fiat has been defeated and that Bitcoin is here. Yeah. And I love pointing out that like the word evangelical in Latin means the bringer of good news. And that's what we're doing as Bitcoiners. We're bringing the good news of what Bitcoin is. And it could be very possible that all of these evil forces see this and they go, oh shit, like, our the game's up.